From time to time, actuaries adjust their assumptions when they do evaluation to fit the real experiences. And one of these adjustments is in the discount rate or the growth of money. And in our example in the city of HR, they went from an 8% discount rate to a 7.5% discount rate. What is the likely impact of that on annual contributions?
A change like that is likely from 8 to 7.5 to increase the contribution rates by about 12% in total. And so if you are dealing with an employee contribution rate that's fixed, it'll be a larger change for the employer contribution rate because of the leveraging. But a downward movement in the investment return assumption raises the contribution rates absent any other changes. Oftentimes, though, when you change one economic assumption, it relates to your view of inflation, which is embedded also in the salary scale. So you may want to change the salary scale as well. And if it changes in the same direction, it dampens the effect of the investment return change. So I would say that the economic assumptions need to be constructed in a consistent way, and you wouldn't necessarily believe in changing just the investment return assumption without changing any of the others. They should all be looked at the same time.
As a labor relations specialist representing management, and we're going into negotiations to change the pension benefits, what factors or what themes or what ideas or what advice could you give us in terms of how to approach reasonable change and how to articulate it?
One thing is that the pension fund is a long-range obligation. And so there's a tendency, I think, sometimes to react too much to short-term news and change the pension plan when that isn't advisable necessarily over the long term. The second point is that pension benefits, once granted, cannot be taken away unless the original grant was for a specific period of time or very limited in some legal way. So you can paint yourself into a corner by always giving pension increases. And the problem has been that pension increases don't have to be paid for out of the current budget. They can be postponed into future budgets, and that's been done way too much. So I would say to keep all those things in mind and not make any pension changes without some long-range modeling to realistically measure how those changes are going to affect the pension plan and the budget of the plan sponsor.
Now, what would this long-range modeling look like? It would have the actuarial assumptions in it, correct?
Yes, it would include actuarial assumptions. It would be really a sequence of valuations done annually, projected into the future, but it would include some things that are not included in the ordinary actuarial valuation, namely the migration of new employees into the system. So you would model whether the active workforce is going to be growing or shrinking or staying about the same. And as a result, you can get different conclusions for how the likely future of the pension contributions are going to run and what the effect's going to be on the budget.
And how would you, in this model, put in the consideration or the factor of the revenue growth or non-growth?
Well, the revenue growth or non-growth of the plan sponsor, so the money from which the pension money is going to come, is a matter for the economists to forecast based on the future viability of the plan sponsor, the city, the county, whatever is the plan sponsor. So that gets a little outside the actuarial area, but it is an important component because I will say, for example, if you have a pension fund that's only 30% funded, you can say, oh, this is an emergency. Well, it isn't an emergency if the plan sponsor is always going to be able to contribute the ARC. If the plan sponsor has enough money that he's always going to be able to contribute the normal cost plus an amortization payment for the unfunded, he always makes those payments, that 30% is going to turn into 100% over time. So the plan isn't in any trouble. But if the plan sponsor doesn't have the revenue source to make those contributions, then even if a plan is 100% funded currently, it is in trouble because the plan sponsor is not going to have enough money to make the normal costs in the future, and it will develop an unfunded. So you have to look at that economic forecast for the plan sponsor's revenue, long range, as well as the growth or shrinkage of the workforce, and build that into your model, because you can get very different conclusions once you do that. If you're thinking about granting a pension increase, which is not the current mode, but if that's the question at hand, I would caution that you can't take them away. So just because we're in a place like 1999 where we can afford a pension increase, doesn't mean we can actually afford it long range. And so I would be inclined to make pension increases of a form that this is a temporary thing to be reviewed later. And unless the revenues continue, unless the earnings continue, unless everything works out the way the actuary predicted they would, the benefit goes away after a period of years. And it's subject to renewal.
Charlie, on behalf of CALPELRA, I would like to thank you for being with us today. This was very helpful and very informative.
Thanks for having me.